If I was going to summarize like my impressions of all 3 seasons of Disenchantment, I think I would say that it's just incredibly mediocre and empty. That doesn't mean it's bad, but it also doesn't make it especially entertaining, and it doesn't make me want to really jump in and talk about it and get into heavy critique. Also, as I'll be talking about later on, the show itself seems really against criticism, and so you know what? That's okay, fine by me. I won't get into a bunch of very specific stuff. I'm just going to talk about my experience of watching it and why it just does nothing for me. All right, here we go. Very briefly, I'll talk about my general feelings about the show and the previous seasons, because I've been watching this show since it first came out. But overall, it really is just a show that's fine. It's fine in just about every way. I have no strong feelings about Matt Groening's work. I like The Simpsons. I like the Golden Age Simpsons stuff quite a bit. I rewatch it very often. I do not care about Futurama. Yeah, the first 2 seasons of this show are completely fine, and I always felt like it was in between things. It's a very in-between show in a lot of different ways. In a really basic way, it seems torn between actual story in a fantasy setting and a comedy show. I don't feel that either of those elements works especially well. I never feel like the plot stuff is all that interesting, or that there are stakes at all, in fact. On the comedy side, it's very, very, very hit or miss for me. I find myself laughing maybe a handful of times over the course of a full 10 or 11 episodes, whatever season is. And then, in a weird way, even though neither of those elements is especially strong, they still feel like they're getting in the way of each other. The story stuff feels like it's getting in the way of the comedy, and then a lot of the jokes just feel out of place. They're not integrated very well into that story. They're just kind of there. I don't think the main cast, I really don't think they have that much chemistry. Abby Jacobson, who voices Bean, is very good. I like her stuff a lot. I like her past work. She was great in BoJack. She's done a good job. I'm sorry. Can you tell this is already going to be a ramble? That's what the internet calls them, right? Oh, good. Thanks, Postmates. I really appreciate that. Everything gets in the way. I never care about the plot because the stakes are absolutely zero. There are no environments that I'm really into. There are no scenarios or specific episodes where I feel like, you know what, that was a compelling story. Never gets to that point. Never felt that with a show, ever. And I think in a lot of ways, season 3 was just the point where I found certain annoyances with the show just snowballing to the point where I couldn't ignore them anymore. You can't ignore Bean's weird absentee mom and the weird lore and like the coup attempts, and I genuinely feel baffled by like the specific characters they choose to keep bringing back. A good example is the pig, who was previously a prince in like the very first episode, and then he got transformed, and he's played by that one British actor from IT Crowd who just uses that same delivery style in everything he's ever been in. I don't understand why he's still here. Is it just that they could afford him? Other times you'll have like somewhat compelling characters who just disappear after their one episode, and I don't understand the choices of who gets to stick around. But in general, no stakes, and it does kind of matter because the show wants us to care about the story, and if you want people to care about a story, you kind of need stakes most of the time. But here, stakes are consistently eliminated, usually over the course of a single episode. The show itself and the writers seem to be incredibly aware of how there's zero stakes or rules for the universe or anything like that, and this ties into the show's very self-defensive tone. I think it's the middle of season 3 here. They have a character who's supposed to be like a troll audience insert, who actually showed up in season 1 as well, and he's like, oh, I don't understand the rules of this world. There's fantasy stuff, and then there's normal stuff and magic, and I don't understand how any of it works. And then they shoot him. It's supposed to be like, ha ha ha, see, the show is self-aware, and also they're saying, who cares about your weird little nitpicks, internet? We don't care. We're just gonna do all this stuff, and it's gonna be great. They use that same character again in the middle of season 3, who comes out and says, I don't understand. There's so many people who are dead, and then the next minute they're back to life and walking around. Like, what are the rules? Oh, can you tell? My brain is melting. This was going to be a 5-minute thing, and now I'm picturing like half an hour solid. There's a scene where Elfo goes to a moving picture show in Steamland, and he's yelling, he's heckling, he's yelling stuff at the screen like, what? Oh, this is awful. This doesn't make any sense. Why do they even put these kinds of scenes in movies, despite the fact that, like, he's never seen a movie before? There's a nitpick for you, show. Is that what you wanted? If you want nitpicks, I can do nitpicks. The show resets itself so often that it's really hard to feel invested in what's happening. But when there are that many twists, it means that none of them matter. The whole point of a twist is something big changes, and all the characters will have to deal with it. When you follow it up with another twist immediately afterwards, either it distracts from the first one or it resets the first one, and none of it has any weight or significance whatsoever. And you know what? I even have a little pet theory about these major problems of, like, you know, this terrible balance between plot stuff and just jokes, or the fact that the story elements they do put in there don't have any stakes, or the fact that they seem insistent on continuing this really boring storyline over the course of 3 whole seasons of a TV show. My theory is that when the show was first being developed, Netflix said, we really like to encourage binge watching. And we know this already. Like, especially with Netflix original shows, they'll reduce the credits countdown to the next episode to basically nothing, so that you're immediately wrapped up in the next one and you don't want to click away. We've also seen this demonstrated really clearly in how Netflix handles original documentary series. My examples here would be Tiger King and Wild Wild Country. The amount of information that's conveyed over the course of an entire documentary series like one of those, it's probably stuff that could have been conveyed over the course of just a feature-length film. Especially with Wild Wild Country, I got the feeling of, oh wow, they are really stretching this out. They're teasing stuff in the first 5 episodes, and then in the 6th episode they'll finally talk about it, and it takes about 5 minutes. So I have a feeling that Netflix said to Matt Groening or the team, we really want this series to have a continuous narrative. That'll keep people watching. That'll keep people invested in between, you know, from one season to the next, and it will keep people watching the whole season at a time. It'll encourage that binge watching as opposed to picking out a couple episodes and then stepping away from it. I feel pretty strongly that the continuing narrative of Disenchantment was essentially forced into the show. Then the fact that it's so bad makes a lot of sense to me. I think it takes a very specific combination of things to make that work. Shaun of the Dead essentially spurred a new generation's worth of, like, genre storytelling that actually has a real emotional impact. There's supposed to be these big moments, you know, where it's like, wow, that's something really significant. Wow, she realizes her mom is evil or something, and that's supposed to be this big moment where you're like, okay, whatever, I've known her for 2 episodes and now she's evil. Okay, I'm just gonna roll with that now. And so why should I feel affected by those big story beats? If the show itself doesn't seem to even notice that they happened, why do I care as someone in the audience? That was very long. We're not going to say episodes, we're going to say chapters, because it's like a book, get it? However, this is a big however too. Here it comes. Season 3 of Disenchantment is my favorite season of the show. That doesn't mean I like it, that doesn't mean it's good, and it doesn't mean that I recommend that you go and watch it. Certain characters get really long monologues. They ended up being some of my favorite parts, and I think it's just because when you have a character just talking for a couple minutes on end, you know, and they're revealing very personal thoughts and feelings, it ends up being effective characterization. Even if it's not very artful characterization, it's a little bit lazy. It's very much tell and not show. But at the same time, I finally got a good sense of the mental space of different characters in the main cast. Una ended up coming back and being one of the most likable characters in the entire show, somehow, after being like a character that it seemed like they had no idea what to do with. And then in season 2, they just get rid of her because they're like, I don't know, she's gone now. She's a pirate. That's cool, right? That was such a nice change of pace. Someone who's effective and has clear motivation and then did things to serve that motivation. I can't think of other characters who have really done that over the course of the show which is a little bit worrying. It felt like people were giving up on this show, like people in the show, from performers to writers and everybody, and I enjoyed that. There's something kind of fun about a show just saying, we know it's not great. Who cares? We're plowing ahead. We gotta make the content for Netflix, and if you don't like it, get out of here. And the biggest one that I can point to is what they are trying to do with John DiMaggio's arc. He plays the king. We all know he's a good voice actor. He's done all these shows. Wow, look, he was so good in that show and that other show. They decided that the king should go like mostly insane. He starts doing this thing. He makes this sound. He goes, "Ma, ma, 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 ma." That's it. That's the funny sound. And that's the new funny sound that he will continue to make for the rest of the season. But it's also not funny and extremely annoying, and they keep doing it over and over and over and over and over, and I can't stand it. My God, do these seem like terrible decisions? I'm going to talk about Tress MacNeille. This woman has done tons of voices for The Simpsons. In Disenchantment, Tress MacNeille, by my general count, it seems like Tress MacNeille is doing, like, in this season especially, at least 10 different voices, including 2 or 3 characters in the main cast. Wow, I can't even remember the character's name. She's part of the secret society with Oddval. It's a mean, scary lady in like a hood. And when Tress MacNeille does voices for other characters on the show, well, it falls into 2 voice categories. There's the one voice that she tends to use. It's the voice she used for like Agnes Skinner on The Simpsons and a bunch of other characters there. And then there's the voice, like the kitty voice that she used for Dot and the Animaniacs. Every character she voices, most of them are just like the adult voice that just sounds like the woman herself. Again, the performances themselves, not bad, but her voice is so distinctive and specific that every time I hear it in another character, I'm just like, that's the same person. Do you not have the money? Is that maybe the problem? Do you not have the money to hire people to do incidental voices? Or like at the very least, could you ask someone else in the cast to do a voice that maybe sounds a little bit different so we don't constantly feel like this is a high school production of something where they just didn't have enough actors, so one person keeps coming back out on stage with a different wig on. Here's normal Eric Andre. Here I am as the knight. For the last 30 years. And it's really distinctive, and all I can think about now is Agnes Skinner in The Simpsons. I'm just thinking about steamed hams now, when I'm supposed to be really wrapped up in the weird, witchcrafty magic story in Disenchantment. This is a fucking mess. Now, coming back around to the good thing I wanted to say about the voice acting, there's one actor in particular who did a great job, and it was a new person who I don't think has been on the show before. They did a good job with a somewhat interesting character, and I couldn't even find her name on the IMDb page because it's just not there. Like, no one's bothered to put it in. I guess her name is Meredith Hagner. She plays a mermaid on this show called Mora, and for one, the character is interesting and like somewhat different from what we tend to get. She also just has a very nice voice, and she has really good comedic timing. I was shocked by how I suddenly enjoyed a vocal performance on the show. Wow, I was not expecting this to be very long at all. I need to move on with my day here. Some of this might make sense to some people. I think that's enough. I think all I really need to say about the show is that it just feels empty. It doesn't actually come together to be something interesting or entertaining or really even funny. Those are all qualities that I look for in a comedy show. It's not a train wreck. I know that the internet really enjoys pushing everything to an extreme. Everything is really, really awful, and it's the worst thing ever, and the title of the video needs to be in all caps, where everything is like the most perfect masterpiece that you've ever seen. and you defy people to disagree with you. Almost all of the time, it's neither of those things. Most things are average. Most things are somewhere in the middle of the scale, and that's fine. But there's a thin line, I think, between mediocre and empty. Something can be fine, daily life, the chores you do on any given day, brushing your teeth and stuff, all that stuff is fine. But empty is a little bit different. We've all had those experiences, right? Maybe you thought, you know what, I'm gonna go back to my hometown, I'm gonna take like a nice tour of my old elementary school. I'm gonna remember what it was like, and I'm gonna feel really nostalgic. And you show up there on after school on a weekday, and you're like, oh, I'll talk to one of the teachers who used to, be there. I'll walk around for a bit, say hi to people. But you realize that a lot of it's changed. They demolished the whole wing of the school where you had most of your classes, and maybe you go outside and the playground's still there, but all the equipment that was there when you were a kid, it's all rusted over, and the paint is flaking all over the place like just old dead skin. And they've put in this nice new equipment right next to it, and it's not nostalgia that you feel, it's just that you don't belong there anymore, and that you're not getting anything out of the experience. These are the empty experiences, and I think most people try to avoid these, and that's why I would say that maybe don't watch Disenchantment.